Simple utilitarian design, all-wheel drive, extremely high reliability and maintainability. All this is about one of the most iconic Soviet vans, UAZ Bukanka. These simple workers were not afraid of off-road and became indispensable in the army and in the provincial hinterland, where there were no roads, but only directions. For many decades, these vans remained unchanged, like life in the Soviet Union. What design features made this car practically immortal? But why were these vans called Bukhanka or Tabletka? And why did the first prototypes of these vans not like the military so much? And the story of this van begins in 1954, when a government decree was issued according to which the Ulyanovsk automobile plant was tasked with designing a small wagon-shaped van. The car was to be based on the components and assemblies of the UAZ 69 SUV, the production of which had just been established at the Ulyanovsk plant. The project was initiated by the military, who needed a reliable utilitarian van with high cross-country ability to perform various transport tasks. Initially, the designers of the Ulyanovsk automobile plant and the NAMI Scientific Automobile and Motor Institute considered two options for manufacturing a new model: a hooded and a hoodless one. Both options were to be based on the components and assemblies of the UAZ 69. As a result, they developed the design of the car from scratch. The newly created van did not have a hood. A car with such a layout, from the military's point of view, was better suited for air transportation. The first UAZ 450, which is exactly the name the van received, had an all-metal body of a wagon layout and a completely modern design for that time, with a large letter U on the radiator grille. Thus, the Ulyanovsk designers intended to repeat the style of the famous Volkswagen transporter vans, on the grilles of which the emblem of the Wolfsburg company was applied. The Ulyanovsk van, despite its utilitarian nature, was designed in a somewhat avant-garde romantic style, with massive stamping on the front panel and a large amount of chrome in the exterior. A feature of the car's design was the body narrowed in the rear. Such a van would harmoniously fit into the traffic of large cities, but the military, who first saw the finished car, did not accept such excesses in the design, considering them unnecessary. Therefore, the subsequent pre-production prototypes had a more concise, simplified design, for which the car later received many characteristic nicknames: Loaf, Gobi, and Tablet. The car was called Loaf because its design was similar to the traditional rectangular bread for the USSR, which was also called kirpich. Years passed, and the design of the UAZ remained as conservative and unchanged as the surrounding Soviet reality. The doors on the first UAZs opened against the movement of the car, like on the humpbacked Zaporozhets. The side windows were sliding. Later, the door hinges were attached to the front pillar. It was much safer this way. But normal window regulators appeared in the car only in 1962. Back in 1957 to 58, the first prototypes of the UAZ 450V minibus were built. But the release of a modification that was difficult for the plant was not established soon. Passenger versions were not a priority. The national economy and the army mainly required cargo vans and small trucks. In 1960, a simplified rear-wheel drive modification of the van called the UAZ 451 was built specifically for operation in cities. The car received a modified and reinforced frame. The engine of this van was moved a little forward. Thus, the driver began to feel more comfortable. Although these cars could only be called comfortable conditionally. The words comfort and Soviet car were often just antonyms. Together with the frame, the body was also strengthened. A side door of the cargo compartment appeared on the van, in addition to the two rear ones. It was these cars that pleased representatives of regional trade organizations, performing the role of delivery vans in cities and provincial villages, where only directions remained from the roads. Thanks to the high ground clearance and strong spring suspension, the Loaf could drive on complete off-road. All-wheel drive UAZs demonstrated even greater cross-country ability. The real stars in the Army were the UAZ 450A ambulances. The interior of this car was divided into two zones, for the driver and passenger, and for patients with a doctor. The sanitary department accommodated 4 stretchers, 2 3-seater folding seats and 1 additional seat near the partition. The UAZ 450A became the main competitor to the PAZ 653 ambulance, based on the GAZ 51 truck. In contrast, the Bukhanka was more comfortable and, thanks to its all-wheel drive, had better cross-country ability, which allowed the evacuation of the wounded in any conditions. When the military received the required number of UAZ ambulances, their production did not stop. The Bukhankas continued to be produced for the civilian market. UAZ 450A ambulances became the main ambulances in rural medical and obstetric stations and emergency departments in district hospitals. Due to their operation in the medical field, these cars were nicknamed the Tablet. Simultaneously with the medical van for the Army, the production of a staff minibus was established, which was called the UAZ 450B. At the request of the customer, the car was equipped with military equipment. The features of this car were classified. UAZ 450D, a flatbed truck version of the car. This small truck, which had good cross-country ability and a carrying capacity of 800 kilograms, was used by organizations and enterprises to transport various goods both within cities and in rural off-road conditions. Also, as an experimental model in Ulyanovsk in 1963, a small UAZ 450P tractor with a 4x4 wheel arrangement was developed. It worked in tandem with a UAZ 752 semi-trailer. This modification of the UAZ did not go into series production. The first generation of loaves was produced until 1965. During this time, more than 55,000 copies in various modifications rolled off the assembly line of the Ulyanovsk plant. In 1965, the plant began production of a new generation of cars called the UAZ 452. The new Bukhanka had a modified radiator grille design, which became larger and simpler and was moved to the lower part of the front panel of the car. The design of this Bukhanka has remained practically unchanged for 60 years. This car has become the best embodiment of the conservatism of the entire Soviet auto industry. In addition to slight cosmetic design changes, the new generation of the van also received certain technical improvements. A new 2.45-liter overhead valve engine with a capacity of 70 horsepower was installed under the hood of the UAZ 452. The car also received a new 4-speed manual gearbox and a modernized transfer case. In 1967, the production of an 11-seater minibus, the UAZ 452V, was finally established. This UAZ was produced in small quantities and was mainly exported. If the external design of the Bukhanka remained practically unchanged, the technical filling of the car was nevertheless modernized. Modernization work on the UAZ 452 lasted as long as 10 years, from the mid-70s to the mid-80s. Such a long period was associated not so much with the large amount of work that had to be done, as with the lack of funding. As a result of the modernization, the car received an improved Ulyanovsk engine with a capacity of 78 horsepower with a dry air filter, a closed cooling system, and crankcase ventilation. The loaf also received a dual-circuit brake system with a vacuum booster, a hydraulic clutch drive, telescopic shock absorbers, and a new steering shaft. The completion of the modernization coincided with Gorbachev's perestroika, which began in 1985. The crisis of the transitional period covered all spheres of the economy of the Soviet Union. It also affected the automotive industry, the financing for the development of which was reduced to a minimum. The collapse in the state sector of the economy reduced the need to purchase new cars. All these negative trends were also felt by the Ulyanovsk automobile plant, whose orders for vans fell to a minimum. To adapt to the new realities, the plant's designers began experiments, developing new types of vans that would allow expanding the scope of the car. Such an opportunity opened up for many plants in the late 80s, when the USSR government transferred most state-owned enterprises to economic calculation. That is, it allowed most of the funds received from economic activities to be left on its own balance sheet and used, for example, to increase wages, modernize production, or finance some of its own promising projects. Such liberalization allowed the Ulyanovsk plant to think about promising models, and there were quite a few of them. the three-axle vans and flatbed trucks, as well as the UAZ all-terrain vehicle with a caterpillar drive and skis instead of front wheels, were especially impressive. However, due to constant involvement in the implementation of state plans, work on these projects remained at the experimental level. Therefore, now Ulyanovsk has once again taken up promising developments, which resulted in versions with a double cabin, UAZ 3909 Farmer, a flatbed truck and a van. They also created a civilian cargo passenger version of the ambulance, UAZ 39625. Many third-party factories, apparently tired of the conservative design of the loaf, created their own restyled versions of the van. A rather clumsy version on the UAZ 3303 chassis was built by the Budyoni machine building plant. A somewhat more interesting application of the loaf was found in Izhevsk, where in 1987 they built two experimental copies of the EZH-039 collection vehicle. In 1994 to 1995, several SARZ-2925 ambulances with a design developed by the Volga automobile plant were assembled in Samara. Loaves were also exported both to the countries of the Socialist Bloc and to the West, where they were often converted into campers by expanding the interior. Today, loaves, with the unchanged design of the 50s, continue to work tirelessly, conquering off-road and broken provincial roads. This simple utilitarian van became a real immortal, Connor McLeod, born of the Soviet automobile industry.